Hi, fifth graders. Today we are going to review for our Chapter 5 quiz. Now we are doing it a little bit different than we have for the other chapters. As you can see, we are not using our textbook for our review. It does say that I have Chapter 5 Test Form A. So if you are at home watching this, you are going to need some scrap paper to work these problems out with me. And then your questions will be very similar to this when you go to take your quiz the following day. So for question number 1, it says, Ashley rode her bicycle 26 5/10 miles in 4 hours, which gives the best estimate of how far Ashley rode in 1 hour. So I know that we normally do not estimate with division, but we are going to go ahead and we are going to divide this and actually figure out how much it would take for 1 hour, and then using the information, then we can go ahead and circle the answer that would be closest to ours. So for question number 1, we know that we would have to take 26 5/10 divided by 4 to figure out how far her actual distance was. So bringing my decimal straight up, I know now that I can start dividing like I have two whole numbers. And when I do this, I notice that 4 cannot go into 2. So I'm going to figure out how many times 4 can go into 26. So I know that 4 times 6 is 24, and that's as close as I'm going to get. So 26 minus 24 gives me 2. Bring down the 5. And then I see that 4 can only go into 25 6 times again, which again is 24. And when I subtract, I do have a remainder. Well, I can still stop my division right here because I know that between choice A and choice B, I have 5/10 or 6/10 of a mile. Well, if I look at my answer, right now I have 6 6/10. And if I round my 6 6/10 to the nearest whole mile, so rounding to the ones place, I see that 6 does in the tenths place tell my 6 in the ones place to bump up to a 7. So that is going to be my correct answer, D, 7 miles. Now we could have chose some compatible numbers for estimating, and our compatible numbers for this, we could have easily solved 28. We would just bump up our overall miles to 28 divided by 4, which we also know is 7. So that was another way that we could have gotten our answer. Moving on to question number 2. It says Grant is making small bags of dried fruit from a large bag of dried fruit that weighs 5 46/100 pounds. If he puts the same amount of dried fruit in each of 6 bags, how much will each bag weigh? So for this, I do have to take the total number of pounds that I am working with for the large bag, which is 5 46/100 pounds, and divide it into these 6 smaller bags. So for this, I do have to bring my decimal straight up before I can solve. And now I solve like I have two whole numbers. Well, I know 6 cannot go into 5, so I'm going to place a 0 since it is in the ones place. And now 6 can go into 54 9 times. 6 times 9 is 54. Subtract, that leaves me with 0. Bring down my next digit. 6 goes into 6 1 time. 6 minus 6 is 0. So I find that I have 91/100ths, which gives me the answer of C. For question number 3, Lori is running in a marathon, which is 26 2/10 miles long. So far, she has run 1/10 of the marathon. How far has Lori run? Well, ladies and gentlemen, taking 1/10 of the number is the same thing as dividing by 10. So I'm going to take 26 2/10 and divide it by 10. So this is going back to lesson 1 from chapter 5. And anytime we have a power of 10 that we're dividing by, we know we have to swoop to the left. And And we know the 0 in the power of 10 tells us how many swoops we have to go. So in 10 I have 1 0, so that's 1 swoop. It is from our decimal, so swooping once to the left does place my decimal now in between the 2 and the 6. So 2 and 62 hundredths miles is our answer. Moving on to the next question. Leilani bought tomatoes that cost 84 cents per pound. She paid $3.36 for the tomatoes. How many pounds of tomatoes did she buy? So for this one, we know we need to take the total cost, which is $3.36, and we will need to divide it by the cost per pound, which is 84 cents. Well, knowing what we know from lesson 7, we cannot keep our decimal in our divisor, so we're essentially multiplying that divisor by 100 to swoop it 2 places to the right to make it a whole number. Remember, whatever you do to the divisor, do the same thing to the dividend. So swooping 2 to the right as well now changes my division problem to 336 divided by 84. So now when I go ahead and solve, I'm going to look at my answer choices that I have to help me take a guess. Now if it is a fill in the blank question, obviously you won't have that to work with. But if it is a multiple choice question, you do have answer choices that you can look at and try and work with. Now looking at A, B, and C, I see that they have 4 as the first number that is being placed. So I know that I'm supposed to try using 4 first. Looking at the problem, I see that 84 doesn't go into 3, nor does it go into 33. So off to the side, I'm now going to try 84 times 4 to make sure it does give me my 336 that I need. So 4 times 4 is 16, carry the 1. 4 times 8 is 32, plus 1 is 33. So that does give me what I need. So I now have just the answer of 4 pounds. So C. So that is what the first 4 of your questions will be like. Again, they may not be multiple choice, they may be fill in or something else. Number 5, Mia has a piece of ribbon that is 30 5/10 yards long. The length is just enough ribbon to make 5 bows that are the same size. How long is the ribbon that she uses for each bow? So I do need to go ahead and set up my problem of 30 5/10 divided by the number of bows she's making, which is 5. So my very first step is to bring my decimal straight up since my divisor is a whole number. And now I can go ahead and start dividing. So 5 cannot go into 3, but it can go into 30 6 times. 5 times 6 is 30. Subtract, that leaves me with 0. Bringing down my next number, 5 goes into 5 one time, which 5 times 1 is 5. And when I subtract, I have nothing left. So that is from lesson 4, where we're just dividing a decimal by a whole number. And we see that our final answer is 6 1/10 yards. Moving on, to the next question. Question number 6 says, Tony collected 16 2/10 pounds of pecans from the tree on his farm. He will give the same weight of pecans to each of 12 friends. How many pounds of pecans will each friend get? So ladies and gentlemen, I do see that I have to take 16 2/10 divided by 12. Again, because my divisor is a whole number, I'm going to bring my decimal straight up, and now I can start dividing. 12 does not go into 1, but it does go into 16 one time. 16 minus 12 is 4. I'm going to bring down the 2. 12 goes into 42 only 3 times. 12 times 3 is 36. When I subtract, that leaves me with 6. Seeing that I have a remainder, that tells me I have to add a 0 to my dividend and bring it down. So now 12 does go into 60 5 times. 12 times 5 does give us that 60, so we no longer have a remainder. So that means each friend will get 1 35/100 pounds. Notice for your multiple choice answers, the digits are all the same, it's just the decimals are in different place values. So please make sure before you start any division that you're bringing your decimal straight up so that way you know that the decimal is in the correct location. And then make sure that your answer is above a place value that it is that you are working with. So every single time I placed a digit, I made sure that it was above one of the dividends digits. Moving on to question number 7. Rashawn is buying 3 books in a trilogy set for $24.81. He will save $6.69 by buying the trilogy set instead of buying individual books. If each book costs the same amount, how much does each of the 3 books cost when purchased individually? So this is back from lesson 8 that we just completed. And we know that if I buy the set, it is actually cheaper than if I would buy the individual books. So we need to figure out if I bought the books individually, how much my total cost would be. And that is by taking the trilogy set of $24.81 and adding on the savings of what you would save if you bought it as a set. So now when I add this together, 1 plus 9 is 10. 8 plus 1 is 9, and then 9 plus 6 is 15. Carry my 1, drop my decimal. 6 plus 4 is 10, plus 1 is 11, and 1 plus 2 is 3. So if I bought each book individually, I would essentially pay $31.50. But I'm not finished yet because I need to know how much one book would cost individually. So I'm going to take my $31.50 and divide it by 3 because that's how many books are in a trilogy. So making sure my decimal is brought straight up, now I can divide. 3 goes into 3 one time. I know that that is 3. 3 minus 3 is 0. Drop down my 1. 3 cannot go into 1, so I'm going to place a 0. 3 goes into 1 0 times. And then 3 times 0 is 0. Subtract, still have the 1. But now I can drop down the 5. 3 does go into 15 5 times. 5 times 3 is 15. Subtract, that leaves me with a 0. Drop down my remaining 0. And 3 goes into 0 0 times. So now I know that my one book would cost $10.50. Moving on to question number 8. It says Ellen drove 175 miles. Her car gets about 9 miles per gallon, which is the best estimate of how many gallons of gas Ellen used. So for this question, I do have to take the 175 and divide it by 9. And remember, we're going to go with the answer that is closest to what we actually get for our final answer. So 9 cannot go into 7, or I'm sorry, 9 cannot go into 1, but it can go into 17 only one time. 17 minus 9 leaves me with 8. Drop down my 5. 9 can go into 85 9 times. So 9 times 9 is 81. Subtract, 85 minus 81 is 4. If you wanted to, you can continue on your division problem by adding a decimal and a 0. Bring your decimal straight up, drop your 0. So now 9 can go into 40. That would be 4 times, which is 36. Subtract. And you see that you're going to keep getting 4 if we would continue this problem on. So now looking at my answer choices to find the best answer, I obviously see that right now I have 19 4/10. Well, I know that automatically eliminates 1 gallon because 1 is not close to 19 at all. Obviously the same thing for 2 gallons. Now I have to choose between 20 and 30 gallons. Well, I know that 19.4 is really, really close to 20, so therefore I know that my final answer will be 20. Question number 9. I'm going to erase some of my subtracting right here so we can read it. Question number 9 says a plumber has a piece of copper tubing that is 112 8/10 inches long. He needs to cut the tubing into 12 equal pieces to repair some leaky pipes. How long will each piece of tubing be? So we know that we have to take 112 8/10 and divide it by the number of pieces that we're making it into, which is 12. So I am going to bring my decimal straight up since my divisor is a whole number. Now I'm going to continue solving as I have two whole numbers. So 12 doesn't go into 1 or 11. So especially if you have multiple choice answers, you can look at your answer choices and you easily see that 12 can go into 112 9 times. 9 is the very first digit that they have listed for all three of those choices. So now 12 times 9 is 108. Subtract, and that leaves me with 4. Bring down the 8. And now 12 goes into 48 4 times, which does give me my 48. So I do not have a remainder. So my final answer is 9 4/10, which for this one is choice C. Moving on to the next page for question number 10. Carly has a piece of yarn that is 7 2/10 yards long. She needs to cut the yarn into pieces of fringe that each measure 3/10 yard long. How many pieces of fringe can she cut from the piece of yarn? So for this question, we do have 7 2/10 divided by 3/10. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we do have a decimal in our divisor, which we know we cannot have, so we need to swoop that decimal out. Remember, to make this divisor a whole number, I'm doing one swoop to the right, so that means I'm essentially multiplying it by 10. Doing the same thing to the dividend, multiplying it by 10, swooping once to the right, now changes my division problem to 72 divided by 3. So now I can go ahead and divide. 3 goes into 7 2 times, which is 6. 7 minus 6 is 1. Drop down the 2. 3 goes into 12 4 times. 3 times 4 is 12. And I no longer have a remainder. So now I have the choice B, 24 pieces. For question number 11, Trevor drove 202 miles to visit his grandparents. It took him 4 hours to get there. What was the average speed that Trevor drove? So 202 divided by 4. And go ahead and start solving. So we know that 4 cannot go into 2, but it does go into 20 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. Subtract, we have nothing left. Drop down the 2. 4 cannot go into 2, so 4 goes into 2 0 times. Subtract, still have that 2, and I can't have a remainder. So I have to add a decimal, make sure I bring it straight up, and then a 0, drop that down. So now 4 can go into 20 5 times, and obviously there is no more remainder. So that means 50.5 miles per hour, which is C. Moving on to the next question. Mackenzie spent a total of $17.50 on Saturday afternoon. She bought a movie ticket for $7.25 and snacks for $4.95. She spent the rest of the money on bus fare to get to the movie and back home. How much was the bus fare each way if each trip cost the same amount? So that way I only have to subtract once. I'm actually going to add together my total that she spent just at the movie theater for the ticket and her snacks. So I know the ticket was $7.25 and her snacks was $4.95. So adding those two together, 5 plus 5 is 10, 9 plus 2 is 11, plus 1 is 12. Drop my decimal. 1 plus 7 is 8, 8 plus 4 is 12. So just at the movie theater alone, she did spend $12.20. Now, remember, she said she spent a total of $17.50, and that included her bus fare to get to the movies and back. So now I can subtract off the movie ticket and the snacks from her total. So 0 minus 0 is 0, 5 minus 2 is 3, drop the decimal, 7 minus 2 is 5, and then 1 minus 1 is 0. So we now know that for the bus fare to get to the movie theater and to get back, she spent a total of $5.30. So I need to take that and divide it by 2 because she rode the bus twice, once to get to the movie theater and once to get home. So now, making sure I bring my decimal straight up, I can now divide. 2 goes into 5 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. Subtract 5 minus 4 is 1. Bring down the 3. 2 goes into 3 6 times. 2 times 6 is 12. Subtract. That leaves me with 1. Drop down the 0. And then 2 goes into 10 5 times. 2 times 5 is 10. So I no longer have a remainder. So $2.65 is the cost for one way on the bus. Moving on to question number 13. It says a school bought 1,000 erasers as part of an order for supplies. The total cost of the erasers was $30. What was the cost for one eraser? So I need to take the total number of dollars that it cost me, which was 30, and I need to divide that by 1,000 erasers. So again, from 5.1, we learned that anytime we are dividing by powers of 10 that are increasing, we swoop left, and the number of zeros tell me how many times I have to swoop. So I know I have to swoop to the left 3 place values. Now remember, it is from the decimal, and because I do not have a decimal in my whole number, I do know that I have to start from the end, because all whole numbers are understood to have their decimal at the end. So swooping 1, 2, 3 to the left, I have an empty swoop. So I am going to place the 0 in the 1's place before I put my decimal. Then after my decimal, I have that empty swoop that I'm going to add a 0, and then I'm going to put the 3. Now remember, because this is a total amount for one eraser, this is a cost, I can only go out 2 decimal place values, so that 0 that was behind the 3, I have to drop off, because I cannot have more than 2 decimal place values when working with change. So therefore, that means they spent 3 cents per eraser. For question number 14, Denise's mother bought some zucchini for 78 cents per pound. If she paid $2.73 for the zucchini, how many pounds of zucchini did she buy? So we need to take the total cost, which was $2.73, and divide it by the cost of 1 pound, which is 78 cents. Well, because my divisor has a decimal, I'm going to multiply it by 100, so I swoop the decimal 2 place values to the right. Do the same thing for the dividend. So I now have the new division problem of 273 divided by 78. So I do see that 78 cannot go into 2, nor can it go into 27. So to figure out how many times 78 can go into 273, if I have multiple choice options, I'm going to look at them, and I notice that for all 3 of the choices that I have, they all start with a 3. So I am going to try to see what 78 times 3 equals. So 3 times 8 is 24. Carry the 2. 3 times 7 is 21. 21 plus 2 is 23. So now I do see that that is as close as I can get. So it is 3 times 234 needs to be subtracted from my dividend. Now notice you do have to borrow before you can subtract. So this 7 does become a 6, the 3 does become a 13. So I have 13 minus 4 is 9, 6 minus 3 is 3, and then 2 minus 2 is 0. So I do see that my remainder is smaller than my divisor, which means I did go up enough times, but I do have a remainder that I can't have. So what I have to do is I have to add a decimal, bring that decimal straight up, and then add a 0 so that way I can continue my division problem. I am going to drop that 0 down now. And again, by looking at my answer choices, I know now that I'm going to try to use 5 times to see if 78 goes into 390 5 times. So 78 times 5, 8 times 5 is 40, and then 7 times 5 is 35, plus 4 does give me 39. So that does give me the 390 that I needed. So 5 times 390 minus 390 is 0. So I do see that my final answer is 3 5/10 pounds, B. Moving on. Notice these last 2 questions that I am going to solve with you do not have answer choices. We do have to fill in the blank. So for this part, that part doesn't matter at home to you. For question number 15, it does say a clerk stacked 11 paper cubes to make a display. The height of the stack is 79 2/10 centimeters. If each paper cube is the same height, what is the height of each cube? So we do have to take the height of the stack, which is 79 2/10, and we're going to divide it by the total number of paper cubes that there are, which was 11. Bringing my decimal straight up, I see that 11 cannot go into 7, but it does go into 79 7 times. 11 times 7 is 77. Subtract, leaves me with 2. Drop down the 2. And 11 can go into 22 2 times, which is 22. And I have nothing left over. So I do see that my final answer is 7 2/10. They're asking for the height. That height was being measured in centimeters, so centimeters would be my label. Now obviously on Schoology, when you take your test at home, you will not have to put in that label. It would be done for you already. Moving on to question number 16. Again, you don't need this top part. I'm going to erase my subtraction from my division problem from the one above, so that way we can easily read this. All right, so for this question, it says Eric spent $22, including sales tax, on 2 jerseys and 3 pairs of socks. The jerseys cost $6.75 each, and the total sales tax was $1.03. How much did each pair of socks cost? So for this question, this is from 5.8, so we know that we have to work backwards. And we know normally with sales tax, we would have to add that on to find our total cost. Well, they've already added the sales tax onto this, so we actually need to take it away. So we need to take $22 and we need to subtract our sales tax, which was $1.03. So I cannot take 0 minus 3, so I am going to borrow from the 2, make it a 1. This 0 is now a 10. Borrow from that, make it a 9, and now this last 0 is a 10. So 10 minus 3 is 7, 9 minus 0 is 9, drop down my decimal, 1 minus 1 is 0, and then bring down my 2. So prior to sales tax, the total bill was $20.97. Now remember, it does say he bought 2 jerseys and 3 pairs of socks. And we do know that the jerseys cost $6.75 each. So because there were 2 of them, I am going to take $6.75 and multiply that by 2. 5 times 2 is 10, carry my 1. 2 times 7 is 14, plus 1 is 15, carry my 1. 2 times 6 is 12, plus 1 is 13. Notice I have 2 decimal place values in that top factor. So my answer has to have 2 decimal place values as well. So 2 jerseys cost $13.50. So I had $20.97 left after I took away the sales tax. So now I also need to take away the $13.50 for the jerseys. So 7 minus 0 is 7, 9 minus 5 is 4, and drop down my decimal, and 20 minus 13 is 7. So for the 3 pairs of socks, he paid $7.47. To find the cost of 1 pair of socks, I'm going to take the $7.47 and divide it by the number of socks he bought, which was 3. Bring my decimal straight up. 3 goes into 7 2 times. 3 times 2 is 6. Subtract, that leaves me with 1. Drop down my 4. 3 goes into 14 4 times, which is 12. 14 minus 12 is 2. Drop down my 7. And 3 goes into 27 9 times, which does give me 27. So I don't have a remainder. So I found that the cost of each pair of socks was $2.49. Again, at home, the dollar sign would be there for you. You just have to make sure that you're typing in the correct number. Please let us know if you have any questions, and we will try our best to answer those. Thanks.